The kitchens of Iron Moon are quietest after midnight. I have walked them since I was a boy who could not sleep, when my father was king, and the smell of cooling bread off the racks was the closest thing I knew to peace. I was walking them this night because a border council had run long and a letter from the southern marches had run longer, and because the wolf in me would not settle to anything I gave him. I had not expected to find more in the dark than the banked ovens and the slow tick of the great iron clock above the spice cupboards. I found her instead. She was a curl of gray wool by the dying hearth, knees drawn up, shoulders shaking so silently that I almost missed her. The hood of her shift had fallen back, and her hair, the color of dark honey when honey has been left a long time in a clay jar, was loose down her arm. She had not heard me come in. The packhounds had not barked. Nothing in the world had warned me that I was about to walk into the moment that would unmake my life. I am not a small man, and the great kitchens of Iron Moon do not allow a king to step softly even when he tries. The flagstones know my boots. One of them, the cracked one beside the long oak table, gave its small dry sound under my weight, and she turned her head. She did not scream. She did not even draw a breath sharp enough to be heard. She only went very still in the way prey goes still. And then, slowly, as if her bones had forgotten the trick, she rose to her feet and pulled her sleeves down toward her wrists with both hands at once. The motion was practiced. That was the first thing I understood before any other thing. She had done it 1,000 times. The pulling down of the sleeves was older in her body than thought. "Forgive me, my lord," she said. Her voice was low and steady in a way that ought to have warned me because no voice that steady has come by its steadiness easily. "I should not be here. I will go." "Stay," I said. She did not stay. She took a step backward toward the larder door, dipped her head in the small bow that house servants give to passing nobles, and turned to go. "Stay," I said again, and this time the word came out of the wolf in me before it came out of the king, and she stopped because no creature in this hold can disobey that voice when I choose to use it. I am not proud of having used it on her. I have asked her since to forgive me for it. She tells me there is nothing to forgive, that she had no idea anyone in the world would ever again say her name with any meaning but contempt, and that the voice that stopped her in the larder door was the first voice in 7 years that had spoken to her like she mattered. She tells me this, and I have to set down whatever I am holding, because my hands shake. She turned back. She kept her eyes lowered. "You are weeping," I said. "It is the smoke from the ovens, my lord." The ovens had been cold for 2 hours. The wolf in me knew it before I did, and a low note woke in my chest at that moment. Not the crash of recognition I had been told to expect of the bond, but a low, sustained note like a great bell struck once and left to hum. The wolf inside me did not rise. He sat down, like an old hound recognizing the threshold of his master's house. The world quieted. The clock above the spice cupboards lost its tick. There was only her, with her hands clenched on her cuffs and her chin trembling. I had never met her. I knew this, and I had known her since before I drew breath. "Come into the light," I said. I made my voice as soft as I could put it, and I did not move toward her, because I had begun in that long second to understand that any motion of mine toward her was a thing she would brace for. She came forward 2 steps. The banked hearth caught the side of her face. She was perhaps 24, perhaps a year more, and she had the kind of beauty that is not noticed across a room because it does not consent to be noticed, gentle, composed, the bones of a quiet courage carried inside a soft face. There was a small white mark at the corner of her mouth, old. There was another along her temple, almost hidden in the hair. She held her wrists pressed to her sides. "What is your name?" I asked. She did not answer. "You are in my hold," I said very gently. "I am asking your name." She said it then, and so quietly I had to lean. "Lyra." I waited. "Lyra Hadron." Hadron, the wolf in me, sitting, listening, lifted his head. The name went through me like the long pull of a tide. "Hadron, my beta's name." My beta, Davrin Hadron. Davrin, who had taken 3 arrows in his chest at the Greycliff Pass 7 winters ago, 3 arrows that had been meant for me. Davrin, who had bled to death in my arms while I begged him not to, while I swore on every old wolf name of our line that whatever he left behind in this world I would keep as I kept my own kin. Davrin, whose daughter had been sent, I had been told, I had been assured, I had received the letter myself with the wax seal of the family, to her mother's people in the southern reaches to be raised in safety, far from the rough mountain pack that had cost her father his life. Davrin, whose daughter I had thought of every winter since on the day of the Greycliff dead, and whose face I could not picture because I had never met her, because she had been 7 years old and away at her aunt's the spring her father had died for me. I looked at the woman in the kitchen of my own hold, and I understood, in one slow descent of cold, that I had not been told the truth about anything for 7 years. "Lyra," I said, my voice was not my own, "your wrists." She closed her eyes. Her shoulders gathered themselves, and then she did the most quietly devastating thing I have ever seen a person do. She turned her hands palm up and rolled the cuffs of her shift back by a thumb's width, no more, just enough to show me, and stood there with her face turned away. The light from the banked hearth caught them. They were not fresh. They were old and silver, and many, paler than her skin, fine as old chalk lines, layered the way ledger entries are layered when a record is kept honest year by year. Her left wrist had a wider band, the kind a binding rope wears in over time. Her right had 3 short marks above the small bone, the kind that come from the edge of something hot held a touch too long against the same place. The inside of her forearms, what I could see of them in that thumb's width of rolled cuff, was a field of small pale histories. I have ridden into battles. I have killed men in front of me with my own teeth. I had never in my life been afraid of anything until I looked at the inside of Lyra Hadron's wrists in the banked light of my own kitchen and understood what I was looking at. I did not move. I did not let my face change. The wolf inside me had not risen. He was very still, very low, his head against the cold flagstones, and he was waiting for me to be a king. He was waiting because he understood, as I did, that whatever I did in the next breath she would carry the rest of her life as the answer to the question of whether anyone in the world was ever going to be safe. "Cover them," I said gently. "Cover them, please." She did. Her hands shook on the cuffs. "Sit," I said. I pulled out the long bench by the oak table slowly, so the wood would scrape and warn her, and I sat on it myself first, and only then did I gesture to the place beside me, 2 arm-spans away. "Sit down here." She did not sit. She came as far as the table and stood, gripping the edge. "I cannot," she said. If it is known I sat with, I am sorry, my lord, I cannot." "What would happen if it were known?" She did not answer. The wolf in me, who had been so still, made a sound in my chest that I have never made before and that I do not want to make again. It was not a growl. It was the sound of something old in me kneeling. "Lyra," I said, "I gave your father an oath." She looked up at me. I had not meant to say it that way. I had meant to be calm, to begin gently, to ask her story without the shape of my own old wound bleeding into the room. But once the words were said, I could not call them back, and I would not have if I could. "He died in my arms at the Greycliff Pass," I said. "He took 3 arrows for me. I swore on every name of my line that what he left behind I would keep as I kept my own kin. I have spent 7 years believing I had kept it. I was told you were in the South at your mother's family. I had a letter. I had a seal. I have asked after you each summer and been told you were well." My voice was steady. The wolf in me was not. "Lyra, look at me." I did not know. She was looking at me. She had not stopped looking at me since the word *oath*. Her chin was trembling, and her hands were on the table edge so tight her knuckles were the color of bone, and she was looking at me as if I were the door of a room she had been locked out of for 7 years. "You did not know," she said. "I did not know." She made a sound. It was the smallest sound, a half a word. a syllable that did not get to be a word, and she put both hands over her mouth and she sat down on the floor. I do not remember rising. I remember being beside her on the kitchen flagstones, not close, an arm's length, the cloak from my shoulders folded once and held out in my two hands so she could see me move and refuse if she chose, and I remember her looking at the cloak as if it were a thing from a story. And I remember saying, "May I?" Because in 7 years of being king of the Iron Moon I had asked permission of very few people in very few rooms, but I asked it of her in that kitchen because she did not yet know that the asking was something she was allowed. She nodded. I laid the cloak over her shoulders. She wept then, not the silent shaking I had walked in upon, that had been the weeping of a creature who had learned long ago that to make any sound at all was to bring something worse into the room. This was different. This was the weeping of a woman who had just been told, in her own kitchen, that the king to whom her father had given his life had not given her up. It was the noise the soul makes when a door it had stopped knocking on opens. I did not touch her. I sat on the cold stones beside her, the cloak between us where it had fallen across her back, and I let her weep, and I waited. When she could speak, she said, "He told me you knew." "Who told you?" "My uncle." I closed my eyes. I have a great many flaws, and one of them is that my mind is fast in the way a knife is fast, not deep, the first cut, but very fast and very clean. And even as she said the word uncle, the whole shape of what had been done in this house for 7 years opened itself out in front of me in one cold map, and I saw all of it. Corvin, Davrin's older half-brother. I had given him the Beta's seat after the Greycliff. I had given him the Beta's house. I had given him, in good faith and against the soft warning of Mother Ash, my old head cook, the wardship of his brother's daughter. I had not asked in 7 years to see her. I had not asked because I had been told she was 800 leagues south at the home of her mother's people, learning her letters under her grandmother's roof. I had asked Corvin for news of her every summer. He had given it to me. He had given me letters in a child's hand, then in a young woman's hand. He had given me a season-by-season account of a girl growing up by the sea who I now understood had never existed, while the real Lyra Hadron had been 3 corridors from my own chambers, learning to pull her sleeves down before she learned to read. "My uncle told me," she said. Her voice was very small, but it had steadied, the way a candle steadies when a hand cups it. "He told me you had not wanted me near. He said the king had no use for the daughter of a dead Beta, and that I was to remember my father's name was a gift I had not earned. He said if I made a noise that reached your hall, if I ever once let a kitchen door swing where you might pass it, I would shame my father's bones and the king would have me put out. He said it was a mercy you let me keep the name. Lyra. He said the marks were so I would remember to be quiet. I had to set my hand on the flagstone beside me to keep my body in the room. The wolf in me, who had been a low hum, was making a sound now in my chest like the deep, slow grinding of stones moving under a mountain. "How long?" I said. 7 years. "How often?" She did not answer that. She would not. I have asked her since, and she has told me. That night she would not, and I did not press, because I understood, even in my own anger, even with the slow grinding under my breastbone, that she was a woman who had not yet been allowed to choose what she said and what she kept, and I would not be the next man to take that choice from her. "Who else?" I said. "Who else knew?" "His wife, the 2 house stewards of the Hadron wing, Mother Ash." Mother Ash. She tried. Lyra's voice broke for the first time on a name that was not her father's. She, when she could, she would send me to a far oven room on the worst days. She slipped me herbs for the marks. She wrote a letter once, my lord, she told me she did, last spring to your steward. It was, she does not know what happened to it. She thought you had read it and chosen to do nothing. I never saw a letter from Mother Ash. She thought, Lyra said again, and a small terrible laugh shook her, the laugh of a person who has watched the same door close so many times she has stopped expecting it to open. She thought you had read it. I sat on the flagstones of my own kitchen, and I understood that the house I had thought I was king of had not been the house I was king of. There had been another house inside it, and in that other house, a daughter of my line had been kept the way one keeps a candle in a closed jar, dim enough not to be seen from a distance. I do not remember rising. I remember being on my feet, and Lyra still on the floor with the cloak around her, and my hands very steady at my sides because I had not yet given myself permission to move them. "I will not touch him tonight," I said. It was not for her, it was for me. I needed to hear it said aloud in a room. "If I touch him tonight I will kill him, and a king who kills a sworn beta in the dark is no better than the worst story told about his line. I will not give him that death. He will be answered for at full council. He will be answered for in daylight, with you in the room if you wish, or in your chambers if you do not. Do you understand me, Lyra?" She nodded. "Tonight," I said, "I am going to walk you to a chamber that has nothing of his in it. Captain Bren will sit at the door. He is my oldest friend, and he will let no one pass, not your uncle, not his wife, not any house steward, not any voice that has ever spoken to you in a way that made you pull your sleeves down. You are not to be alone tonight in any room your uncle has ever set foot in. May I take you there?" "My lord." "May I?" "Yes." I held out my hand to help her rise. I did not move my fingers. She looked at my hand for a long moment, and then she set hers in it. It was the first time I had touched her. The low bell note in my chest that had been humming since the moment she said Lyra asterisk did not crash. It deepened. It went underneath the floor of me and rang there, like the long note of an old hold bell tolling at the bottom of a well, and the wolf inside me, sitting until then, listening, lay down across her feet in the dark of my mind and put his head on her shoes and breathed out, and was at rest. I had been a king of the Iron Moon for 9 years. I had been waiting for that sound for all of them, and I had not known I was waiting. "Mate," the wolf said in my chest very quietly. "Mate, ours." I did not say it aloud. There would have been 1,000 cruelties in saying it aloud in that kitchen, in that hour, after what she had told me. I closed my hand around hers very gently, the way one closes a hand around a moth one does not wish to crush, and I walked her out of the kitchen and down the corridor and up the back stair to the small East Tower chamber that had been my grandmother's sewing room, and I sent for Captain Bren. Bren came at a run. He had been my second since we were 11. He took in the sight of me, and the woman in my cloak, and the marks at the corner of her mouth and her temple, and he did not ask. He took her in with one slow, steady look, and then he gave her a bow, not the small bow a captain gives a kitchen girl, but the full bow a captain gives the beta's house, and he said, "My Lady Hadron," and Lyra began to cry again, very softly, as if she had not heard her own family name said in that tone in a long time. Bren pretended he had not seen, which was a kindness, and put his shoulder to the doorframe outside her room as if it had grown there. I did not go to bed. I went to my study and I sat at my father's desk, and I lit one candle, and I wrote 3 letters in my own hand. The first to the captain of the Wolf Guard, summoning 12 of them at first light. The second to the steward of the Hadron house, ordering the doors of that wing sealed, and no person within to leave their chamber until I came. The third to old Mother Ash in her cottage by the kitchen yard, asking her to come to me at dawn and to bring with her any letter, any note, any record she had kept of the last 7 years, and telling her that I had not seen the letter she had written last spring, that I had never seen any letter she had ever written, and that I was sorry. I did not sleep. I did not try. I sat at my father's desk, and I held the small wax seal of my line in my hand, and I waited for the dark to break. The wolf inside me lay across the floor of my mind with his head on a pair of worn shoes that were not in the room. He did not stir all night. He breathed slow and easy. He had come home, and he was not letting her go again, and neither was I. Mother Ash came at the first thinning of the dark. She is a small woman, my old head cook, narrow as a willow stake, with 2 long gray braids down her back and the strongest forearms of any soul in this hold. She has fed 3 kings of the Iron Moon by now, and she does not bow. She came into my study and looked at me for a long moment with her hands knotted in her apron, and she said, "You found her." "I found her." She put both hands over her face. "Mother Ash," I said, "I am not angry with you." "You ought to be," she said into her hands. "I am not. I am angry with myself." She lowered her hands. Her eyes were wet, but she was ash, and the tears stayed on the rims and did not fall. She set a small bundle on my desk, 3 letters tied with kitchen twine. They were not opened. The wax of my own house was unbroken on each of them. 3, she said. "I sent the first the second year, I sent the second the fourth, I sent the third last spring. None reached your hand, I knew it. I knew it after the second, but I sent the third anyway because I am stubborn." She drew herself up. "I should have come to you, Thuron. I should have come to your study door at midnight and made you listen. I told myself you were too far from us to be reached. I told myself she had no one if not me in the kitchens. I told myself a great many things, and I let her keep being hurt because I told them to myself. You may dismiss me. You may dismiss me from this hold and from the Iron Moon altogether, and I would not say one word against it. Sit down, Mother Ash." She sat. Her hands were shaking. I had never seen her hands shake. I poured her a cup of water from the jug at my elbow and put it in front of her. "I will not dismiss you," I said. "You did what you could in a house where I had not given you the standing to do more. The fault is mine. When this is set right at council, I am going to give you the standing you ought always to have had. From this morning you sit on my hold council. You will have a chair beside Bren's at the long table, and a vote, and a voice that no steward of any wing of this hold may interrupt. That is what I owe you, and I am ashamed it was not done sooner." She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded, one small hard nod, and she drank the water, and she said, "Then I will sit, and I will tell every word of 7 years to your council when you call it. Today. Today." She rose. At the door she turned and said, "Thuron." "Yes." "She does not know yet that she is your mate, does she?" I did not answer. There was nothing to say. Mother Ash had been in the kitchens of this hold longer than I had been alive, and there had never been a use in telling her a thing she had already seen. "Be slow with her," Mother Ash said. "Be very slow. She has not been spoken to in 7 years like she is allowed to want anything. She is going to need to learn that she is allowed to want before she can learn that she is allowed to want you. Do you hear me, my king?" "I hear you." "Then I will go and put the kettles on. The council will sit a long time today, and they will get hungry, and the kitchens are mine again." She left. I sat at my father's desk in the thin gray light, and I felt, for the first time in 7 years, that the house I was king of might one day be a house again. The full council of the Iron Moon does not sit often. It is a thing kings call when something has been broken at the bone of a pack, and it is not called for less. I called it that morning. The bell in the high pine tower was rung from the first light to the second, and by the 3rd hour of the morning the long council hall, which the pack call the stone room, because the table at its center is a single slab of dark stone older than any wolf name we still remember, was full. The captains of the 4 wolf guards were there. The masters of the 4 house wings were there. The matrons of the kitchens and the looms and the stables and the Mooncier's tower were there. The pack keeper was there with his ledgers under his arm. Mother Ash was there, in the chair I had ordered set beside Bren's, and the room had taken in that detail without a word, the way a room takes in a tree that has grown overnight outside a window. Corvin Hadron was there. Corvin's wife Aliska was there. I had not slept. I do not think it showed in my face. I have been a king 9 years, and I have learned what the face is for. Lyra was not in the room. I had not asked her to come. I had gone to her chamber at first light, and Bren had let me in, and she had been sitting by the small east window with her knees drawn up under her shift and her hair brushed and her sleeves still buttoned at the wrists, and I had stood at 3 paces from her chair and said, "There is a council at the 3rd bell. Your uncle will be there. I am going to put him out of this pack today, and I am going to do it whether or not you are in the room. You have 3 choices, and they are all yours. You may sit beside me at the table. You may sit in a small chair by the east door where you can hear and not be seen. You may stay here in this chamber with Mother Ash sending up word every quarter hour. Tell me which." She had looked at me for a long time. Her eyes are gray, pale gray, like the inside of a river stone, and they had stayed steady on mine. "I will sit by the door," she said, "behind the screen if there is one. There is, I will have it brought." "My lord." "Yes." Will you tell them my father's name?" I had to swallow before I could answer. "His name is going to be the first word out of my mouth," I had said. "His name is going to be the last word, too." She had nodded and looked back to the window. The carved screen of pale ash that had stood in my grandmother's chamber was brought to the east wall of the stone room, and a low chair was set behind it, and Mother Ash was placed there beside the chair with a hand on its back. The pack keeper began the call of council. The 4 captains gave their oaths. The 4 house masters gave theirs. I rose at the head of the table. "This council," I said, "is called for a matter older than this morning. 7 winters ago at the Greycliff Pass, Davrin Hadron, my beta and the keeper of my left flank for 11 years, took 3 arrows that had been meant for me. He died of those wounds in my arms within the hour. Before he died, he gave me one oath. That oath was that I would keep what he left behind in this world as I kept my own kin. I gave it. I have not kept it, I will keep it now." The room had been silent before I spoke. It had become quieter, the kind of quiet that has weight. I did not look at Corvin, not yet. "Davrin left a daughter," I said. "Lyra Hadron. She was 7 the spring her father died. I was told by the wax-sealed letter of her family that she had been sent south to her mother's people, to be raised away from the pack that had cost her father his life. I have asked after her every summer since. I have been given letters in her hand. I have been given accounts of her growing up under her grandmother's roof 800 leagues from this hall. None of it was true. Lyra Hadron has not seen the sea. She has not seen her grandmother. She has not been 1 league outside the gates of this hold in 7 years. I let it stand a moment. She has been in the kitchens. She has been in the kitchens of the Hadron wing the whole time. She has been there under the wardship of her uncle Corvin Hadron, who took her father's seat at this table 7 winters ago. I will not detail in this room what was done to her in those 7 years. She is not yet ready for it to be detailed in her hearing, and her hearing is the only hearing in this hold that matters. I will say only what is required for this council to do its work." I looked then at Corvin. He had risen halfway from his chair when I began. He had not been able to make himself rise the rest of the way. He was a tall man, broad in the shoulder the way Davrin had been broad, with the same dark hair his brother had had, though his had silvered earlier and unevenly, the way a tree silvers at the side that has taken the storm. His eyes were on me. He did not look at the screen by the east wall. I do not think he yet understood that the screen was there for a reason. "Corvin Hadron," I said, "stand." He stood. "You came to this seat 7 winters ago at my appointment. I gave you your brother's chair, his house, and the wardship of his daughter. You took an oath of that wardship before the moonseer in this very room. The girl was to be safeguarded, sheltered, educated, and presented to me each summer for my blessing and any need she might have. You have given me, instead of her, letters in a forged hand, accounts of a life she has not lived, and a story of a southern grandmother who has been dead these 11 years, of which I was unaware until Mother Ash set the matter before me 1 hour ago. Is any of this in dispute?" I had not raised my voice. I had not needed to. He did not answer. "Is any of this in dispute, Corvin?" "My king," he said. His voice was not the voice of the beta I had appointed. It was the voice of a man whose first instinct was to find which corner of the room had a door behind it. There has been a confusion. The girl she has been kept here at her own choosing. She is not. Mother Ash, I said, stand. Mother Ash rose from her place by the screen. Her braids were tighter than they had been at dawn, the way she does her braids when there is a heavy day's work ahead. You have served 3 kings of the Iron Moon in these kitchens, I said. 4, she said. Your great-grandfather a season before he died. Forgive me. 4. You have served 4 kings of the Iron Moon. You have lived under the kitchen rafters of the Hadron Wing 38 years. You knew Davrin Hadron since he was 8 years old. You knew his daughter from the night of her birth. Will you tell this council what you have seen of Lyra Hadron these past 7 years? She did. She told it plain. She told it in the order it had happened, the small things first, the larger later, the way a careful witness tells a thing. The beta's daughter brought to the back ovens the night her uncle took the seat. The kitchen mistress at the time, Hala, who had asked why a beta's daughter was being put to scrubbing pots, and who had been dismissed the next morning and sent down to the lower farms. Hala's chair given to a new woman, one of Aliska Hadron's cousins, who had not asked questions. The first time Mother Ash had heard the strap. The first time she had seen a mark. The second time. The third. The letter she had written the second year, sealed and sent up by the house runner and never answered. The letter she had written the 4th year, sealed and sent up by a different house runner and never answered. The letter she had written last spring, sealed and given into the hand of the senior house steward of the Hadron Wing, with a request that it be put directly into the king's own hand, which had been promised and which had not been done. The bandages she had begged from the Monsieur's apprentice under the pretense of a kitchen burn that did not exist. The herb poultice she had taught Lyra to make in secret so she would not have to ask anyone again. The night 4 winters ago, when Lyra had come down to the ovens at dawn, unable to speak, and Mother Ash had not been allowed by the house steward to send for a healer, and had sat with her instead through the morning rolls. The stone room did not move. Mother Ash finished. She sat. Her hands were not shaking. They had been shaking at dawn in my study. They were not shaking now. There is a kind of strength that does not come up until it is needed in front of others. I looked at Corvin. You took an oath in this room, I said. Before this table, before the Monsieur of the Iron Moon. You laid your hand on the dark stone and you said the words. You said, I will guard her as I guard the moon over her father's grave. Do you remember saying it? He did not answer. Do you remember saying it, Corvin? My king. Do you remember saying it? Yes. Then the matter, I said, is in no part in dispute, and it does not require this council to deliberate. The matter requires only that the sentence be set. The sentence will be set by this council, not by me. I am the king of this pack, and I have on this matter a wound the size of a daughter of my line, and I cannot trust my hand to hold a knife in the room where my dead beta is being remembered. Captain Bren, you have the chair. Bren rose. His face was very still. He has known me since we were 11. He knew what I had taken out of my hand when I had given him the chair, and he understood why. He said it. He spoke each charge plainly: forgery of the king's seal upon the letters from the south, misuse of the wardship oath, assault upon a ward, concealment of the same, and intimidation of the kitchen witnesses, and he asked the council, charge by charge, to set the answer. The council answered. Corvin Hadron was stripped of the beta seat. He was stripped of the Hadron name and forbidden to carry it in any pack of the Iron Moon Valley or any pack neighboring. His housewing was given over to the wardship of Mother Ash until such time as Lyra Hadron chose its disposal. His wife Aliska, who had risen halfway through Mother Ash's testimony and tried to leave the room and been turned back by Bren at the door, was sentenced to the same name stripping for her complicity, and sent under guard to her own distant kin in the far southern reach, with the order that she was not to return to the Iron Moon Valley in her lifetime. The two house stewards who had taken the letters from Mother Ash's hand and made them disappear were sentenced to the lower farms for the rest of their working years, under the eye of Halla, the kitchen mistress they had once sent down there. And Corvin himself, Corvin, who had used my beta's seat to do what he had done, was sentenced by full council to banishment under guard to the winter passes north of the Greycliff, where the old prison hold of the Iron Moon stands empty most years, and where the snow comes down in the second moon of autumn and does not lift until the fourth moon of spring. He was sentenced to remain there at the king's pleasure, which the council set at no fewer than 9 winters, one for each year of the wardship oath he had broken, with 2 added for the years of forgery, and he was to be brought back into the king's presence at no point in those 9 years for any reason except his death. Captain Bren finished the sentence and laid his hand on the dark stone and said the closing word, which is the same closing word it has been at the stone room for longer than any wolf in this valley can remember. "It is done," the council answered, all in one voice as they do. "It is done." Corvin was taken out by the wolf guards. He did not look at the screen by the east wall as he passed it. He did not look at me. He looked at the dark stone of the table, and he kept his eyes there until he was through the doors. I waited until the doors had closed. I waited until the room had settled. I waited until I could feel the low bell note in my chest again, which had been very quiet through the sentencing, because I had not allowed it room. Then I turned to the screen by the east wall and I said, "Lyra, if you can, come here." There was a long quiet, and then the screen moved a little and she came around it. She had put on a clean gray gown that one of the house women had brought her at dawn. She had her hair plaited down her back. Her sleeves were buttoned at her wrists, as she had worn them every day of 7 years, and she did not unbutton them. There is no reason a room of strangers should ever have to see what was done, but she stood up straight, and she did not lower her eyes, and she walked the length of the stone room with Mother Ash beside her, and she stopped at the place at the table where her father had used to sit. The whole council rose. I do not think she had been ready for that. I am not sure I had been ready for it either, though I had ordered it in my heart the moment I had decided to bring her into the room. The 4 captains and the 4 housemasters and the matrons of the kitchens and looms and stables and tower, and the pack keeper with his ledgers, and Bren with his hand on the dark stone, they all rose, and they stood at their places, and they bowed their heads to the daughter of the man who had taken the arrows meant for me. She did not weep this time. I think she had wept what she had to weep that night on the kitchen floor. She set her hand on the dark stone where her father had set his hand 1,000 times. She kept it there a moment. Then she lifted it and she looked at me. "My king," she said. "My Lady Hadron. What did you want to ask me?" The whole room was waiting. I had not in fact told her or anyone what I was going to ask. I had not wanted to tell her in any room but a quiet one, but the wolf in me had been very clear all morning that what I was going to ask, I would ask only in the room where her father's chair stood, and only with the full council standing at it, because she had had too many things done to her in the dark. "I am going to ask you 2 things, I said. "The first is whether you will take your father's seat at this table. The beta's chair has been empty since this dawn, and it is yours by right of blood and by right of being who you are. Mother Ash will sit beside you while you learn the work for as long as you wish her to. You do not have to answer that now. Take as long as you need." She looked at the chair to her right. It was a heavy chair, carved with the small running wolf of the Hadron line on the back. She did not sit in it, but she set her other hand on its back. "And the second," she said. The low bell note in my chest was very full. It was not quiet now. "The second," I said, "is this. From the moment I walked into the kitchens last night I have known a thing I will not pretend to you I have not known. The wolf in me knew it before I did. You are my mate, Lyra Hadron. The bond struck the moment you put your hand in mine on the kitchen flagstones. I am not asking you to acknowledge it. I am not asking you to claim it. I am not asking you for anything that you must give me in this room or in any room ever, and I will be the king of this pack, and you will be the keeper of the Hadron seat, whether you ever turn your face toward me again as anything but a friend of your father's house. Do you hear me? She had begun, very quietly, to cry. I hear you. What I am asking, and this is the only thing I am asking, is whether you would allow me, in the slow time of a year or longer, with Mother Ash at your side and Captain Bren at your door for as long as you wish him there, to court you. Not to claim you, to court you. To send you small things and ask after your day and walk the gardens with you when the weather is kind, and earn slowly, in the only honest way left to me, the right to one day stand at this table and ask you a question I have no right to ask you tonight. That is all I am asking. You may say no. You may say no and be the beta of the Iron Moon and never speak my name as anything but my king for the rest of your life, and I will keep my oath to your father, and I will keep it gladly. She did not answer for a long moment. The whole council stood, no one moved. My king, she said. Yes. Yes, she said. You may court me. The low bell note in my chest went down to the bottom of me and rang there, and the wolf inside me, who had been lying across her shoes in the kitchen and had not stirred for a night and a day, lifted his head and rested it against the inside of my ribs very softly, like a hand against a closed door from the inside. I did not cross to her. I did not touch her. I bowed to her, low, a king's bow, the full one I had given exactly twice before in my life, both times to my own father in his last year, and she set both her hands on her father's chair and lowered her head over them, and Mother Ash beside her put one steady old hand on her back. Captain Bren said quietly, "It is done." The council answered, "It is done." The year that followed was a slow year. I have heard pack songs since that try to make of it a swift thing, that say I claimed her at Greycliff in the second moon, that the mark burned on us both in the first month, that the white wolf of her line rose at the autumn right and the pack bowed in one motion at the stone room door. They are kind songs and they are wrong. Lyra would tell you they are wrong. She was the one living in the year, not the pack singers. What was true was this. She took her father's seat at the table in the second week. Mother Ash sat beside her for 2 months, until Lyra waved her off one morning with a small, dry smile and said, "I think I can read the kitchen yard ledgers without supervision." Ash, asterisk, and Mother Ash wept all the way back to her ovens and would not say why. The kitchens of the Hadron wing, which had been her cage, became, by Lyra's own choosing, the place she most often did her beta's work, because she said the smell of the bread and the noise of the undercooks were a kind of company she had not had a name for in 7 years, and that she did not wish to give them up just because the seat at the long table now belonged to her. She moved her writing table into a corner of the great kitchen, behind a small screen the undercooks made her, and she did the ledgers there with a mug of dark tea at her elbow. The undercooks took to calling her my Lady Hadron of the back oven, which she allowed. She did not let me touch her for the first 3 months. I did not ask. I sent her, every 7th day, a small thing, a sprig of moonwort from the king's garden, a copy of a book my mother had loved, a carved wolf no bigger than a walnut that my father had made me when I was 8 and that I had kept in a drawer ever since. She kept them all. The little wolf sits on her writing table to this day, beside the inkwell, where the undercooks pat it for luck. In the 4th month she set her hand in mine, of her own choosing, on the bridge across the kitchen yard where I had stopped to ask her something about the spring planting. She did not say anything about it. She did not look at me. She simply set her hand in mine on the rail of the bridge and left it there for the count of perhaps 30, and then took it back, and went on with the spring planting question. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my father's desk with the low bell note ringing in my chest, and I did not sleep. And I did not write any of the 8 letters I tried to write, because there was no one in the world I could have explained it to who would have understood. Mother Ash came up at first light with bread and would not look at me, which was her way of saying she knew. In the 7th month, at the autumn rite, she stood beside me at the Moonsier's circle when the white moon came over the grey cliff. She did not wear her father's grey. She wore a deep blue gown the color of the inside of a winter lake, that the loom women of the Iron Moon had made her with her name worked in silver at the hem, and she stood with her sleeves loose at her wrists for the first time in the years I had known her, and the marks were there in the moonlight, and she did not hide them. The pack saw. They did not flinch. They had been told by then what had been done to her under their own roofs by a man who had worn the beta's seat. They had been told that their king had not known. They had been told that the king's oath to Davrin Hadron had been kept 7 winters late and was being kept now in daylight. They had had time to sit with it. At the Moonsier's circle, when the white moon was at the height, the old Moonsier of the Iron Moon, who has the cataract eye and who has not seen a face clearly in 11 years, laid his thin old hands on Lyra's wrists, both of them over the marks, and stood that way a long moment. Then he turned to the pack and said, in the small voice he has now, that everyone leans in to hear, "The wolf of this woman has been waiting. The wolf of this woman is not afraid any more." And the pack, which was not made to bow, which I had not ordered to bow, which I would not have permitted to bow, knelt of itself, in the way a pack kneels at a Moonsier's words, the whole circle going down in one slow soft motion like a seagrass going down before a tide. Lyra looked at me. There were tears on her face. She did not wipe them. "My king," she said. "My lady. Will you ask me your question now?" I asked her. She said yes. I will not write the rite down. The rite of the Iron Moon is older than any pen of ours, and there are things in it that belong to the moon and the stones and the still-eyed wolves at the edge of the pines, and not to a page. I will say only that her mark came up on her wrist beside the older marks, silver on silver, and that mine came up on mine, and that the 2 marks together looked like nothing so much as a small bell, struck once, with the long line of its note still ringing under it. Mother Ash said it looked like a kitchen, the round of an oven and the bar of a hearth, and Lyra laughed at that, in the way she had begun to laugh by then, in the small, dry, warm way that I have loved more than any sound in this hold. She did not become a different woman after the rite. That is the other thing the pack songs get wrong. She did not bloom suddenly into a Luna who had been hidden under the wool of a kitchen girl. She was the same woman she had been on the flagstones, quiet, careful, gentle, with a steady courage that I have never learned to deserve, and what changed only was that the room around her had changed. She had been the same all along. The hold was finally what she had been all along. She rebuilt the Hadron wing the next spring. She kept the kitchens. She tore out her uncle's private hall and made it into a low schoolroom for the pack children, with windows on the eastern side and a long table of pale ash and a small library of her father's books, which I had thought lost, and which Mother Ash had hidden in a flower bin the night Corvin took the seat. She told me, the day she found them again, that she had not understood until the moment Mother Ash had pulled them out from under the rye what she had hoped for in 7 years of going down to the kitchens. I had hoped, she said, that someone had kept something of him. And I had said, Mother Ash kept everything of him there was to keep, and I will spend the rest of my life learning what she did. And Lyra had set her hand on mine on the flower bin, and we had stood there a long minute before either of us could speak. The mark on her wrist healed the marks beneath it. I do not understand it. The Moonseer says it has happened before and that there are old songs about it, in the 3rd book of the Iron Moon, which I have not read. What I know is that the silver of our bond ran into the silver of the older lines that her uncle's strap and his hot ladle had left, and that by the end of the year you could not tell, looking at her wrist in any light but the very brightest noon, that anything had ever been written there but a bell. She did not forgive her uncle. She did not need to, and I did not ask her to. He died in the winter passes in the 2nd year of his sentence, of a lung fever, and the guards brought us word, and Lyra heard it standing in the kitchen by the great oven with a wooden spoon in her hand, and she did not stop stirring. She said only, "Thank you to the guard, and will you eat before you go back?" And the guard sat at the undercook's table and Mother Ash fed him, and Lyra went on with the stew. Mother Ash sits to this day in the chair beside Bren's at the stone room. She votes. She is interrupted by no steward of any wing. She is 68 years old and she still feeds this hold 3 meals a day, because she will not give up the ovens, and when she dies, which I do not allow myself to think on, the kitchens of the Iron Moon will go into mourning, the way a pack goes into mourning for one of its own. Bren married a horse mistress of the Western Pines in our 3rd year and has 2 sons. He still stands at my left. I had a small stone set, the spring after the rite, in the kitchen yard garden of the Hadron wing. It is no taller than a man's knee, and it has on it only one word, which is Davrin's name. Lyra goes out to it the first warm day of every spring with a sprig of moonwort and a cup of tea, and she sits on the bench beside it, and she tells her father about the year, and the undercooks of the kitchens. By some old kitchen yard law, I did not order and could not lift if I wanted to leave the kitchen door cracked at exactly that hour, so the smell of the rising bread carries out to her. She always comes back smelling of it. I walked past the door tonight. The hold is quiet. It is past midnight, which is the hour I am king of in this house, and the kitchens are banked, and the long iron clock above the spice cupboards is ticking, and somewhere up the back stair my wife is asleep with one hand under her cheek, and the other curled around the small wooden wolf my father carved me when I was 8. The wolf inside me is lying across her shoes in the dark of my mind, breathing slow and easy, where he has lain every night since the night I found her on the kitchen floor. I do not walk the kitchens alone after midnight anymore. I have not needed to. The wolf in me is at rest. He came home the night I knelt down on the flagstones beside the daughter of my old beta and offered her my hand to rise, and he has not stirred from that home since. I keep my oath to Davrin in daylight now. I keep it badly, on the days I am tired and short-tempered and not the king he would have wanted me to be. I keep it well, on the days I remember to ask my wife what she needs before I ask anyone else in this hold what they need. I keep it best on the spring mornings when she goes out to her father's stone with her tea and her sprig of moonwort, and I stand at the kitchen window with a cup of my own and watch her tell him, in her steady, quiet voice, what the year has been. That is the story. That is the whole of it. The rest is the years, and the years are mine and hers and ours. The wolf in me sighs in the dark of my chest and is still.